There's a growing number of countries in the world where the answers to these following questions are all women. Those questions being, who's doing most of the legwork raising children? Women. Who is most focused on getting a good education? Women. And maybe the big one, who is working to bring home a good income? Women. So essentially what he's worked out through his research are that young women's employment rate is overtaking men's in a number of developed countries, including the UK. So lots of young men, this is 20 to 24-year-olds, not in employment at all. More men than women used to go to university, slightly more men than women used to go to university. Now it is far more women than men going to university in that age group. Young women are now not only more likely than men to be caring for family members, but they're also more likely to be in work or full-time education. And here's the tough one, I think, for us as men, and that's what we're going to go in on. The share of young men who are neither in education, in work, or looking for a job is climbing in a number of developed worlds. And what John Byrne Murdoch is saying is that there is a huge pool, a growing pool of completely disenfranchised young men who are not interested in being part of society. What he's seen in most of these countries is those people moving towards issues like the riots we saw here in the United Kingdom. So that group is more motivated to take part in right-wing populism, for example, more motivated to move towards things like radicalism, whatever that might be.
Is he saying that's what the data's saying?
No. He is saying that he has seen those people who are surveyed, their interest is peaked more in those things. So things like Trump, things like populist leaders. So obviously they've surveyed people, they've looked at the numbers, and what they're saying is within the people that they've surveyed, in terms of their interests, the things that they look at, the things that they take on board, instead of looking for a job, they'll be more likely to watch a Trump rally. That's in the United States and a particular group, obviously, but you understand the trend.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, what made it, what piqued your interest about this piece? What was it that really struck you about it that you felt we had to discuss?
The main thing for me was this sense that there are young men, a growing number of young men who are disconnecting themselves from society, which I feel is a sad thing, but also possibly a dangerous thing too. We've seen, you can pick any form of radicalism over kind of the last 30 years, and what you see is it is young men who are feeling disenfranchised from society because they either can't find a job, work, any kind of training to do the thing that they want to do with their life, but they also find it difficult to make those personal and social connections with their community and with others. What many of those people have done is either trend towards, it's difficult to say, as in to use a catch-all phrase, but they've moved towards seeing other marginalized groups as a target, whether that be women, whether that be gay people, whether that be trans people. They've become angry with others in society who they perceive are being prioritized over them. Even people on benefits, for example. We've seen that trend in the last 30 years, anger being directed towards them or towards refugees. We need people to feel like they're part of society. We need people to contribute towards a society. We need people to be happy, have friends. To see those numbers of growing of people that don't have that, for me, is a sad thing, but also could possibly be a worrying thing too, which is why I wanted to discuss it.
Yeah, I mean, but sorry, the reason I ask is I'm not sure we're a changing societal norms are changing. There wasn't really anything about those numbers, that data, that surprised me in some respects. We're aware, and we've talked about before, the rise of the malign influences who would try to have our young men go in particular directions, and the need to guard against that. We've discussed the fact that in lots of areas of our society, doors are being closed to women. So it's right that those doors should be opened. And it's right that the data is telling us that there are now surges. There are spikes in the numbers of women that are able to avail themselves of the opportunities to do particular things. So I'm not worried as such. I always say in the areas where we should have particular focus, the onus is on us to change those things. What are we doing with our young men? What are we doing with our sons? I've got 2 sons. What am I doing with them to make sure that their outlook on life is such that they're not taken in by the... I know people have started calling them actors now, but I hate that term, but the people who will pop up on social media and try to have your son believe in a certain ideal, or to have them go in a particular direction. It's incumbent on me to speak to my sons, to teach them about the values of respect and hard work, and to have a larger world perspective. And if I do those things, then I start from my home the process of changing the status quo. So am I concerned about those numbers that suggest that women are doing well? No, I'm not.
It's interesting. So I agree with you. I've separated, I think, and we'll come to the young women doing better than young men, because I think that is a big positive. I think it creates a different social dynamic, but I think we'll come to it. But I did want to start with that bit of the data that was around young men who are not in education, not in work, and not even looking for work, being a growing number across a number of developed nations. And what you felt that suggested. I get what you're saying about your own children. They clearly are not in that category, right? But the point that John Burdock's making is that number of people is growing. Now, clearly those people maybe don't have an influence like you in their lives. So if that number does continue to grow across, he says, a number of developed nations, what will that mean for our future?
If we just take the UK nation as a starting point, I think a lot of people have identified the areas of education that are failing young black men. And by that I mean this: if you go into the average teacher in many areas, you very seldom find black male teachers. What you often find is teachers who respond to issues with young black children by writing it off as bad behaviour, when there could be a range of factors that those things could relate to. And I speak as somebody who has a number of teachers in my family, and an Ofsted inspector. So I'm aware of the data and the anecdotal evidence, and also the statistical evidence around the failures for young black men. And what happens is you go to pupil referral units and you find young men who should never have ever been sent there, but are sent there by teachers who don't have the same kind of cultural understanding, awareness, patience, and respond to even the slightest thing by pushing them in the direction of the exit door, if you like, of their education. So then you have a system where those children have a poor educational experience, they're stigmatized, and then they end up in a situation where they're ill-equipped for work. Is any of that their fault? In a lot of cases, no. And so if you're asking me what we have to do about it, it's primarily addressing the school system.
Well, okay, let me flip it then, Darren, and talk about the positives for women and young girls, if you like. I guess we're talking about women here, but in terms of the educational outcomes, most of that was done before the age of 18. It's proving dividends for young women in the United States and the UK in particular, in terms of their earning, in terms of the way that they are progressing through their careers, to go back to those pathways, Darren. So things have massively improved, particularly for women kind of under the age of 27. This is looking at, you can only see it as a huge positive, actually, because what it creates is Well, I say you should only look at it as a huge positive. In terms of the workplace, it is a huge positive. What we're seeing here is that they're earning more, they're being promoted more consistently, they are outperforming men in their fields, which is obviously helping to redress a huge imbalance, in society and also in the workplace. Again, that is a huge positive. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is they're still taking on the more, in inverted commas, traditional roles when it comes to society and the home. So they are caring for family members more often. They're taking on the lion's share of the responsibility when it comes to raising children, even though they are now outperforming men in the workplace as well. So what does that mean for our society in terms of maybe the men stepping up and doing more? I don't know.
I don't either. To be honest with you, as I say, it's quite hard sometimes to just take the data that's obtained by. So sometimes we can look at numbers like that and think that there are hard and fast things that can be done to address that data. And I don't know. I mean, it's a subject you wanted to talk about. What do you think should be done?
Well, I think it is a message to men, younger men generally, about the changing roles in society. It's not the 1950s anymore. It's a positive, I think, for everyone, that in some households it isn't like, well, you're a man, you have to earn more money, you have to go out there and do this, and you're a woman, you have to stay at home and take care of children or the family. I think those roles can change. The world has changed. That is not an issue. That can be a positive for society. I just think it needs to be accepted far more. I think the messages that still go out in terms of television, film, social media, whatever it might be, I think still push those kind of more traditional roles. Maybe that's because the people making that content are familiar with that. Maybe they don't experience a different world. I hate to see...
Do you think so? I mean, I think that a lot of what we see actually challenges that orthodoxy. I think there is a lot of conversation around the changing roles of women. There is a lot of conversation around glass ceilings and how they need to be broken. There's a lot of conversation around diversity and actually the fact that the dial should be shifting but isn't, and isn't shifting fast enough. But I think that the culture now, the climate now, it's been spoken about, and I'm using the words carefully because I think it isn't changing as quickly as it should be. Certainly not for us as people of colour, it isn't. And I think they are the specifics that we need to drill down into. But in terms of the roles of women, and especially us as Afro-Caribbean men, there are traditional sections of our society, or traditionalists, I should say, who believe in a certain way. And those things are being addressed and changed as the generations move on. So I think that there is progress being made. And, I'd be quite keen to stress that as well, because I think there's a belief that it isn't the case. And we are still in what some people would describe as a darker age. And I don't think that's the case.
So it's an interesting point. I mean, I wasn't speaking specifically about any ethnic group. I just imagined asking kind of men under 30 what they imagine their home life would be. Say you speak to a single person, under 30, hypothetically ask them what they think their future home life would be. And I still think people believe that it would be quite traditional. I still think young men would think, well, I'll be the breadwinner, I need to earn more money. I think if you ask a lot of younger women as well under the age of 30, they would believe that they would have an expectation for their partner to, let's put it this way, earn at least as much as them. I think you hear that quite a lot. Oh, well, we've got to be at least on a similar level. And it's interesting because obviously these suggest that won't be the case, and that many women will be ahead of their partners in terms of what they bring into the household, which may well change the dynamic in terms of who does stay at home, for example, if that happens, to look after kids in their early life, and I would be intrigued to see in the future how that dynamic changes. I'm still intrigued to see now whether people believe, male or female believe that should be the case, because I still think that there would be a significant portion of higher earners, female higher earners, who would want to spend time at home looking after their children in the early portion of their life. So would that dynamic change in the future? Well, I don't know. I don't know if people will say, look, I earn more money, so I'm going to go to work, because we need to do that. This is, I think, probably where my conversation comes from. I do think that the dynamics of economy are changing people's lives to such a drastic extent. Whether it's good or bad, I don't know. But this feeling that even you can't have a family because you haven't got enough money, or you can't get married because you haven't got the right finances. I think people on social media often talk about transactional, young people seeing things as very transactional. So almost looking for a certain wage when they look for a partner, looking for a certain job, house, car, whatever it might be. The idea of this kind of stepping into it for love thing almost being out of the window now. I don't know. I'm not in that age group, but I think the statistics suggested to me that the dynamics for younger people will definitely change. And I think that's a positive. I don't know what other people feel, and that's why I wanted to discuss it.
Right. Comments. Get in the comments. Tell us what you think.
Do you think the dynamic will change?
I think it's changing already. I was listening to a really good phone-in around the fact that so many two-parent families work. There are so many two-parent families where both parents work, where both parents have jobs, which mean that there is no unbalance in terms of the division of labour. And I think that's more and more the case. I certainly, our circle and people we know, there isn't this sort of older belief in the traditional roles for men and women. I think and even the people watching this, I think for a lot of them, that's dead now. There are some people, of course, who are traditionalists and believe in a certain way of working between them, and that may well work for them, and I don't want to deride them at all. But I don't feel that there is any kind of archaic thinking in that regard.
Do you think, this is going to be my final question, do you think it's gone already in terms of, listen, we don't date people obviously anymore, we're not in that age group or in the market, but do you think that idea that a man has to be the main breadwinner, do you think women will stop caring or looking for that in their partner?
No, human beings, the way that human beings work, you can never say never about anything. And there are some people who feel that way. And it does work both ways as well. There are certain things that I would suggest are kind of archaic, but still do exist. But as you rightly said before, we come from a different generation. I know you don't like me to take you down with me, but you're very much from my generation.
You're allowed to this time.
The current generation are very much a swipe right or left generation. Just looking at some statistics the other day around the numbers of people who meet partners online as opposed to the older ways of meeting people through friends, through family, through work, through social events, it's changed considerably. And with that, and that, I think, certainly according to the data, is because a lot of people are working so much more. They don't have the opportunities to socialize in the same ways that we used to. And as such, because they're working so much more, the same expectations of them can't apply. And that's why I think it's changed already.
Brilliant. Darren, appreciate that. We might get into it a little bit more next week. We've got a special guest coming for you. So make sure you check out next week's Whisper It Loudly, because we've got our best guest, a huge guest. I'm going to whisper it.
Don't say it.
Because
Don't say it.
These things can get called off last minute, but hopefully we've got a fantastic guest for you coming up next week. So make sure you don't miss it. Make sure you're subscribed, hit the notification so you won't miss an episode. Share, like, leave a comment, and we'll be back with you next week. Darren, appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Troy and Jordan, you're in my bad books, but I'll see you next week nonetheless.